everybody. So today we are going to be looking some more at the astrology surrounding September 11th, 2001. Me and Brandy did a video looking at the astrology surrounding September 11th, but we looked at it strictly from an event chart lens. The charts that we looked at were the chart for when the plane flew into the North Tower, the plane flew into the South Tower, the plane flew into the Pentagon, and for when Flight 93 crashed. But again, we looked at it strictly from an event chart lens. Now, I don't think that you can have a full discussion about 9/11 or about the astrology surrounding 9/11 without bringing into play the questions and the theories about 9/11. Which is why I'm doing this video here now by myself. I do feel like these questions need to be asked. And, 9/11 is one of those generational defining tragic fucking things that even people that would not consider themselves to be conspiracy theorists have questions about and have theories about. And I don't even like the term conspiracy theorist. I don't even fucking like that term. I really don't. I only use it here so you all know what I'm talking, so I'm understandable. But I don't even fucking like that term because I feel like that term was created to dissuade and dismiss people's questions, valid questions about things that happen. and this is something that even people like that I know in my life who normally wouldn't go down those sorts of rabbit holes have gone down them with 9/11. Because there's so much weird shit with it. Now, somebody in the video that I did with Brandy, somebody left a comment saying that they would love to see an uncensored version of that video. I don't know how uncensored I will actually be here. I don't write a script when I do videos on YouTube. I don't have a fucking script. I don't fuck with that shit. I'm pretty off the cuff, and I don't edit either. So what you see is what you get. This video, I've tried to film this, this is like the 12th fucking time I've tried to film this because I want to do this with a certain amount of tact, sensitivity, and delicacy that I feel like it deserves because so many people lost their lives. So many people lost loved ones. It was such a tragic fucking event that I feel like it does require a certain amount of delicacy and tact and sensitivity. So I probably will be a little more censored than I normally am in videos. There might be things that I start to say and I'm like, never mind, don't want to do it. Don't want to say that. Back it up. Because I can't think of a tactful way to say it or a sensitive way to say it. I just want to throw that out there. So if I do seem a little bit more censored, that is why. Now what I'm going to be sorry, some squirrels doing some crazy shit over there. I think that's my ADHD. I'm going to be looking at these charts, looking at these questions, and there are a ton of questions, a ton of theories about 9/11. I can't possibly address them all here. So what I'm going to focus on are the ones that I see in the astrology. So if I don't bring your question up, it could be that I am not aware that it's a question in the first place because there are so many questions it's possible that I don't realize the question that you have is a question. It could be it could be that I don't want to. It could be that I just don't want to. Maybe I see something and I don't even want to touch it. It's possible. Again, because I can't figure out how to do it in a tactful way, or in a sensitive way. So if I don't bring up your question, those might be some of the reasons why, or I just don't see it in the astrology. That's also possible too. Yeah. Before I start though, I do want to say that my heart, obviously, I know this was almost 22 years ago, but my heart still goes out to anybody who lost loved ones in this awful, awful, awful event. Yeah, it's just, my heart goes out to you. Okay, so we are going to start with the chart when the plane flew into the North Tower. We'll be looking at this one. Be looking at the one for the Pentagon because that one, yeah, I got questions about that one. And when World Trade Center 7 falls, that's one Brandy and I didn't look at. That needs to be looked at. Okay. So I'm going to share the photo. Make sure I share the right fucking. Okay. So this is when the plane flew. This is when the plane flew into the North Tower at 8:46 a.m. on September 11th, 2001. The first thing I noticed here is that that third ninth axis is lit the fuck up. This kind of bothers me. You know, third house is more like areas that are local to you. You know, this could be your city or state, your region, province, depending on where you are. It could even be your country. Now, I know typically fourth house is thought of more like as homeland in this kind of a context, but I think that an area that's local to you could be your country, whereas the ninth house tends to be more international or foreign. And seeing all this shit going on in both of these houses, my mind automatically kind of goes to, you know, one of the questions that people have is, was the US involved in this in some capacity? You know, I've seen theories that, you know, the US is actually the one who orchestrated the whole thing. To, you know, there was just negligence. I do think the US does have involvement here. I just do. I just do. Now, what kind of involvement? That's the question. But I do think there is US involvement here. I do think that there is. I just do, and I know that nobody probably really wants to hear that, but I do think that there is. There's just too much. There's too much going on along the local and international part of this. Now, we do have Sagittarius on the cusp of the third house, right? Which could point towards, like, Sagittarius energy has an affinity for the ninth house. So there can be like a foreign flavor to Sagittarius. And then you've got, you know, in this chart, you have Mars on the cusp of the seventh house. Seventh house would be like the perpetrator or perpetrators or whatever. And like a forensic chart, it would be. And you've got that Mars in the third house. This could point towards, you know, like the hijackers living here, but living locally, but being foreign, being not from the US. And I believe that they lived here for a while, but they weren't US citizens or anything. It could point to that. It certainly could. But, you know, that Mars is the ruler of that seventh house. That Mars isn't in Sagittarius, though. That Mars is in Capricorn. If that Mars was in Sagittarius, I do think that could point to the hijackers, but especially with Capricorn, you know, on the cusp of the fourth house in this chart. The homeland. Fourth house would be homeland. There's something about that feels like that seventh house. I do feel like the US is involved. Now, the question is how? Because we have that moon conjunct the I mentioned this in the video that I did with Brandy, that moon, 28 degrees, 4 minutes of Gemini in the 9th house. Moon is always co-ruler in event charts and horary charts, in like the forensic charts, always co-ruler in these charts. And it is conjunct the galactic anti-center. Now, anybody who has watched any of my galactic center videos, which I've done a shitload of them, has heard me talk about the galactic anti-center, which is opposite the GC. The galactic center is at like 20, right now it's like 27 degrees something Sagittarius. Galactic anti-center would be at 27 degrees something Gemini. Anybody that's watched any of those, though, has probably heard me talk about the galactic anti-center. And the galactic anti-center, I do believe, is a place in the sky where there is blinding, because it's by a big bright star, so things are blinded. It's also like an area that is covered in space dust, literally covered in space dust. This area of the sky is literally covered in space dust. So seeing the moon as co-ruler of this chart conjunct the galactic anti-center does make me think that there is blinding going on here. I also think the American people were kind of blinded by this as well, or blinded to this, or however you want to put that. And because we're talking about Gemini, the sign of Gemini, multiple things, I really do feel like this blinding can go multiple ways, or this clouding space dust can go multiple ways. The thing about the galactic anti-center, though, is I do think it can get shocked with the energy overflow that happens at the GC. And this is, you know, this event was very shocking. Very, very shocking. And it's, you know, that moon is also conjunct the North Node, which makes me think that the shocking here like if you think about 9/11, it changed a lot of things. Changed a lot of things. A lot of things came from 9/11. Again, this is an event that people who normally wouldn't question things question. This is one of those events. So I kind of feel like that all of those things are reflected in the moon conjunct the galactic anti-center. Because I do think that shocking there has kind of unfolded over time, if that makes sense. Because people may not have had questions about it right when it happened, but over time, you know, people have. I do think there's something about that there. And I also think, and I'll say this also, I think there were a lot of countries involved in this, just because of how busy that 3-9 axis is. I'm not going to go into the who and what I'm not going to go into all that, but I do think that there were multiple countries involved in this. I also think it's very possible that we didn't, again, with the blinding, with the moon conjunct the galactic anti-center, I think it's very possible that we didn't, how do I want to say this tactfully, that we didn't know how bad it was going to be. Or some parts of government didn't know how bad this was going to be. And I bring that up because, you know, we were aware, if I'm not mistaken, the different alphabet agencies were aware that there was going to be an attack. Now, I don't know if they really tried to do anything about that or not. Here, it wouldn't surprise me if either it nothing got kind of done about it because they were blinded in some way about like how bad it might be, or maybe they didn't actually believe that it was going to happen. I don't know. Or it's something that, how do I want to say this? Feels like, I don't know, negligence. I'll just put it like that. I'll just put it that way. I think that's probably good enough. Another thing that stands out here is Mercury conjunct the ascendant. Now, Mercury can represent a lot of things, Mercury can want to express a lot of things. Some of those things though are lying, conning. I do think it's interesting. It's right on the ascendant. Virgo is on the cusp of the 12th house. Virgo is ruled by Mercury. So we've got that unconscious shit from the 12th house, hidden shit, coming to the ascendant. That stands out to me too. And this stands out to me. Normally I might not go with Mercury this way, but when you see the chart for World Trade Center 7, you'll see why I'm kind of going this way with Mercury. Because we got another little fucker that comes up in that one that kind of points to a similar thing. So I think it's, I think it's possible that, I'll leave it at that. Pluto is conjunct the great attractor at this time. That is a generational thing, right? Because Pluto moves very slow, but it definitely stands out here. Like, great attractor attracts things. It can attract things. Like whatever planet or whatever happens to be conjunct the great attractor, I think it'll attract that kind of energy. So Pluto, we're talking about destruction. We're talking about transformation. And this event is very Plutonian. So that makes sense here. And when I look at that Mars, back to that Mars for just a second, that Mars conjunct the South Node. When I see that, I do think of this as a continuation. This does feel like a continuation to me, something from the past. South Node can represent like in a natal chart, I would think of it as like what the person comes into this lifetime was comfortable with, what have you. But in this sort of a chart, there's something about this that speaks like it's a continuation of something. And that Mars is also conjunct the galactic center. It's like within a 4 or 5 degree orb, but it is conjunct the galactic center, which makes that Mars highly, highly energized. Highly, highly energized, warped, transformed, spaghettified, all of those things. So it kind of feels like here, like it's a continuation of something that was war shit is what comes to mind, because that Mars in Capricorn feels very militant. I mentioned that in the video with Brandy. It does feel very militant. Chiron is also conjunct the galactic center too. But again, Chiron is a generate, it moves slower, but that's still, to have it conjunct the GC when an event like this happens definitely makes sense. Just all of the pain. And, pain, and I want to be careful how I say this, because there was also, to watch, I mentioned this in the video with Brandy, like to watch the country come together and help one another after this. There is something healing about that too on a massive scale. So I do think Chiron conjunct the GC fits here. Now, this also feels very money resource based. Scorpio is on the cusp of the second house. We have Pluto, modern ruler of Scorpio, in the third. We have and also Scorpio is also traditionally ruled by Mars. And then that, yeah, to me, this feels money motivated, but the exchange of money, especially with the third house has an affinity for Gemini and Mercury. Mercury is like exchange of Mercury can represent, the actual exchange of currency. And also Mercury being right on the ascendant. This feels like this has to do with money, resources. This is an exchange of some kind. It ties into the why. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing this one. Now we are going to look at the one for the Pentagon. Okay. I think it's this one. I hope. Okay. So this is when the Pentagon was hit with the plane at 9:37 a.m. On September 11th. Now, this chart, in the other chart, in the chart that we just looked at, and in the chart for when the South Tower was hit, Venus was the chart ruler in the 10th house. It's still the chart ruler in this chart and in the 10th house, but this is the one chart where that little motherfucker is intercepted. One chart that it's not intercepted in any of the other ones, but it's intercepted in this one. Now, interceptions tend to point towards things being less clear, right? Because that sign intercepted does not have a house with which to freely express itself through. So it's kind of locked away. Doesn't mean it can't be utilized. It's just kind of locked away. So there is kind of a hidden or a clouding or this kind of shit that can go on with signs intercepted. Now Venus represents a lot of things, right? Venus can represent money, or can represent money. I was going to say that last, but yes, it can represent money. Represent money, actual money. The exchange of currency is Mercury, but money is a Venusian thing. Now, let me back this up just slightly, because on September 10th of 2001, Donald Rumsfeld was on, I don't know who the fuck he was even talking to or what the fuck the point of the conversation was, but he mentioned that the Pentagon could not track $2.3 trillion. Now, this is not something that was just that they just found out for the first time on September 10th. There is a record that this was known through audits and shit for like a year or two. But I do think it's very coincidental that he happens to go up there talking about this. He was talking about other shit too, but this came out. And then the Pentagon gets hit. And I believe the part that got hit, and I could be wrong, but I believe the part that got hit was the part that handled that kind of shit. I think it's coincidental. like to, again, this feels very money motivated to me. So I definitely have questions about that, because that does stand out to me. Especially that this would be the one chart that would have Venus intercepted. I so badly want to say something, but I don't know how to say it tactfully. So I might just not say it at all. But it does make me curious about that though. And I feel like there, I'll just leave it like this. There is something about that, perhaps that something about money being hidden, money being lost, money, whatever, that does feel like it plays in here in some way into this particular chart. Again, though, as I'm saying that, I do not think this was solely, like, I think there were a lot of countries involved in this event too. So well, I think there were many players. And again, I'll just stop myself there. I'm not gonna, I'll just stop myself. Also, Pisces is now on that was another thing that changed in this chart. Pisces on the cusp of the 5th and the 6th. It's on both houses. Virgo on the cusp of the 11th and the 12th. It does, Virgo is very realistic. It's mundane, it's very realistic, very practical. It feels like, and with Pisces on the cusp of the 6th house here, and then both being on the cusps of the 11th and the 5th as well, there's something here that feels like there's, I know that I mentioned in the video with Brandy that the Pisces on the cusp of the 6th and all of those things, like you could be looking at like, a oneness or a wholeness between people in the real world. Absolutely. Absolutely. This event did bring that out in people, but it could also be like a lack of clarity. Clouding of things for sure. Virgo on the cusp of the 12th could be hiding the details, a hiding of the details, things like that. It could come about like that. Then you've got Mercury in the, more solidly in the 12th here, more anchored in. Yeah. Trying to think if there was anything else I wanted to mention about this particular chart. Oh yeah, also with Venus. You have Taurus on the cusp of the 8th house. Taurus is ruled by Venus. The 8th house in these sorts of charts and event charts and whatever, they can mean literal death. From a natal chart perspective, I don't generally take that I don't take that approach. I think of it more as like transformation, metamorphosis, those sorts of things. In an event chart or a forensic chart, it could totally be actual death. So you've got, the 8th house flowing into Venus in Leo, intercepted in the 10th. This could point to very public, very, death that's public. I think it probably does. Though with that Venus intercepted, there is something hidden about it. I do think there's something hidden about it. This actually would kind of make sense because I believe that cameras could be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but there was something with the cameras at the Pentagon that day where there's something with the footage. I don't know exactly what it was. I've looked at so many different things as I've done this, but there was something with the fucking footage of capturing it. One of the cameras was down, something, I don't know, something. I kind of wonder if that could kind of speak to that a little bit, even like the hidden component. Also, you know, the eighth house is also things like other people's resources, other people's money, debts, things like that, loans. And I do wonder if that plays in at all here too. I don't know. I'm just thinking to myself, I don't even really want to say that the more I think about it, but I do wonder if it plays in. I'll just leave it at that. I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, definitely have questions about this chart. Oh, and also, no, I'm not even gonna go there. Okay. I'm not even gonna go there. Okay, so let's talk about World Trade Center 7. Now, this building was not hit by a plane. It was hit by debris, and things like that. My question really isn't that my personal question doesn't have to do with the with the building falling or that it fell. It's how it fell. Does anybody, have y'all watched how World Trade Center 7 fell? It's a very clean fall. I don't know. There's something about the way that it fell that bothers me. Now, I would believe that it would get damaged from, you know, falling debris from, you know, the North and the South Tower. I would believe that there were fires. I would believe that there'd be structural damage and that perhaps some of it would collapse. But the way that it falls is weird. It's very weird, the way that it falls. Now we have we have Uranus in the first house here, right? We've got an Aquarius ascendant, Uranus in the first house. That could point to the weirdness here. I mean, it certainly could, right? Aquarius ascendant, it could certainly point to how weird this was. I could see that. But then you've got that little fucker Neptune conjunct the ascendant. Now, Neptune is another planet that can also tie in with lying, conning, these kinds of things. Clouding. You know. I think it's interesting that in these charts, you've got these two, specifically Mercury and Neptune, conjunct the ascendants. And then in this chart, you know, you've got Neptune conjunct the ascendant, and you got that Mercury intercepted in the 8th. Which feels more, you know, the 8th house is also a little bit more secretive. So I think that is interesting. If you follow the rulers from the other from the other charts, you know, you got Venus, which was the ruler of all the other charts, in the 7th. 7th house would normally be like, in a forensic chart, it'd be like the perpetrator or the cause. You've got Leo on the cusp of the 7th house, and the sun also in the 7th house. To me, you know, I see those things, right? And then I see the Aquarius rising with Uranus in the first house, and Saturn in the 4th. Saturn traditionally ruling Aquarius. Saturn in the 4th, which deals with, like, you know, the 4th house, if you think of that as like homeland in this sort of context. 4th house, having Taurus on the cusp, Venus ruled, flowing into the 7th. To me, this one, and you don't have the same shit going on in the 3rd, 9th houses, like where I was saying before that I feel like a lot of countries were involved with the other stuff. I don't see that here. This feels like us. This feels like the US. You also have the moon has moved into Cancer by this point. Moon always co-rules these charts. You know, Cancer energy has an affinity for the fourth house as well. Homeland and things like that. It's a very personal sign. Very, very personal sign. To me, this feels more personally afflicted, if you will. It just does to me. Now, I'll also throw this out there. The tenets of World Trade Center 7. You know, most of the World Trade Center, it's banking and finance. It was banking and financial stuff at the time. I'm sure it probably is now, but I haven't looked at the tenants who are there now. But in 2001, it was primarily banking and financial shit and attorneys, whatever, you know, stuff like that. But on, I believe it was the 25th floor of the World Trade Center 7. The IRS was there, but there was a CIA office and Department of Defense that shared this floor with the IRS. Now, this stands out to me, especially with the weird shit with Pentagon Chart. I don't believe the CIA or the Department of Defense were in, and I could be wrong about that. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the only building they were in was 7. So I think I'll just leave it at that. I think that's interesting that they happened to be there. And at the time when 9/11 happened, I believe these were kind of clandestine offices. Nobody was hurt, you know, and everybody was evacuated before this building fell. Luckily, everybody was. But nobody, I don't believe this wasn't made public until later that the CIA and the Department of Defense shared the floor with the IRS. I don't believe that was known before. It wasn't known for a few years, until a few years after this happened. I do think that's interesting. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to touch on in this chart. I think that's probably pretty good. I will say this though, you know, because the blinding thing that I mentioned with like the galactic anti-center, it does come up. It does come up also with the fixed stars for Mars, which was, here, I'll put it back on that one chart real quick. I'll put it back on the first one for a second. Okay, so for that fixed star for Mars, there's also a blinding theme going on. It's at 1 degree, 26 minutes of Capricorn. Okay, so there's one at 1:04 Capricorn. Eye troubles, blindness, depression, hopelessly doomed, morbid religious outlook, no concern for human life. And then there's one at 1:16 Capricorn, which is eye trouble, blindness, or bad eyesight. So there's also that blinding thing, you know, coming back around, like the moon, talking about the moon conjunct the anti-center being like a blinding thing. The same thing is kind of said about Mars. And I'll be honest here, you know, while I do think that there are many countries involved, multiple angles, I do not think this is simple at all. I do not think there is anything simple about any of this. There's nothing simple about it. It feels very much like the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing, because it feels very all over the place. And that Gemini moon also feels that way. And it's blinded to that the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. The left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. That is very much how this feels. These specifically those charts that the North Tower and the Pentagon that we looked at here, even the other ones that we looked at in the video that I did with Brandy, the South Tower getting hit and Flight 93 crashing. Just all that shit along the 3-9 axis Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to head off. If you have any thoughts or anything, feel free to share them in the comments. Any of your theories or what have you, from, you know, like if you kind of look at charts like this too, and you want to throw out some things that you notice, by all means do that. Yeah. And I will see you all later.